Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden, taking a look at tonight's 12-game slate. Last big slate before the All-Star break. We got 2 games tomorrow, and then you got a nice 12 days off after this.
Yeah, you guys are lucky you don't have to see me or hear from me for like 12 days. So I think I got like 10 days before I have to do cheat sheets again and for that weekend, and then it's gonna be 12 days until the Monday that we record again. So I'm looking forward to the break.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. Of course, we get a big, heavy-loaded slate before to send us off. A pretty good slate. Obviously, you kind of would expect with 12 games. I'm hoping nothing really pops up later on in the day, but with a 12-game slate and a day before the All-Star break, it probably will.
It definitely will, and it kind of sucks that this is taking place on Valentine's Day, because even if I wasn't single and all alone and all by myself, I probably wouldn't be able to do anything because I have to, take care of 12 different basketball games. So I guess if you are all alone and you're feeling down, you have 12 really good games to cheer you up.
I think DraftKings, the mission should have been like get a girlfriend and you get like 500.
Probably it should have been, but I don't know. DraftKings and from what I've seen on Twitter over the past couple of years and some friends of mine, DraftKings tends to lead towards more divorces than hookups. So.
It's true. It's very true. It divides the family time. So
yes, it does.
First game here, we got Atlanta and Detroit, 209 total. Starting with this Atlanta side, you like anything here?
I like a few things here. First off, I guess we'll start with Dennis Schroder, who last night, obviously in a spot where you would predict him being kind of a letdown against a tough Milwaukee defense. He kind of flopped. He went 8 of 16 from the floor, only had 28 fantasy points. But this is a matchup against a Detroit team, first of all, that really struggles to defend the rim. Andre Drummond, for all his dominance in the paint as far as being a rebounder and whatnot, not a very good rim protector. They're giving up or allowing opponents to shoot 66% from the floor. This is a matchup that Schroder has actually been fairly solid in. So far this season, he's averaging about 37 fantasy points per game against this team. His price is up there a little bit. I wanted to throw him in the tournament article, but I didn't, because I think he kind of needs to get you 40 fantasy points to be tournament viable. But I still think he's a solid option here. So that's where it really starts for me.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind him. And, on a big slate like this, like you can kind of probably expect, Schroder to get a little bit overlooked in all formats. And he's right up there with a couple other guys that I really like as well. I think this is a game that maybe people just kind of take off on tonight's slate and narrow it down a little bit, especially this Hawks side. Schroder's probably the only one for me that I really have a lot of interest in. I know Dedmon's been playing pretty well. Bazemore has kind of cooled off. I would love to use Prince here in this spot because it is such a good spot, but he's just been so bad of late.
Yeah, I think Bazemore is fine in cash in tournaments, obviously, like especially where he's priced at. I mean, what is he, like 52 or something like that on 53 on DraftKings, and over on FanDuel he's still 56. Like, I think a reasonable expectation for him would be about 25, 28 fantasy points with plenty of upside in a matchup against a Pistons team that's really struggling to defend the wings now that Avery Bradley's gone. So I do think Bazemore is fine in all formats. You mentioned Dedmon. I don't mind going there. He's still cheap enough to consider. He's playing really well, and obviously we saw just a couple games ago him just destroy this team. So I think it's probably chasing a little bit, but in cash games, Dedmon's still a solid option, especially on DraftKings where he's power forward and center eligible.
Yeah, for sure. You have any interest in anyone else here?
I don't mind if you want to get some Urson exposure. He's still cheap enough to roll out there. And then you mentioned Prince as well. You could take a tournament flyer there, but he's kind of losing time at points to some of these other guys. So if you want some tournament exposure, feel free, but he's not high on my radar.
Yep. Detroit side here, I think we'll start with Andre Drummond. Good spot. It's a spot where obviously he smashed Atlanta. I think 3 times he's averaged 55 fantasy points, I think, against Atlanta this season. Put up 57 just the other day against them. I don't mind going back to the well here with Drummond. Like, he's an interesting pay-up option, especially, with Davis, I think, going to suck up a lot of the ownership against the Lakers front court. Drummond's going to be that spin-off for me.
Yeah, he's one of the centers that I have my eye on. There's a couple more that I really, really like here. But if you're paying up, obviously he's an excellent pivot off of the aforementioned Davis. And it's a spot where, I mean, going up against this terrible Atlanta team, obviously we know they're really, really bad against centers. They can't rebound. They give up a bunch of points in the paint. Like, he's a fine option. Like, I couldn't say no to him. So he's definitely on my radar there. Blake Griffin, another guy that you can definitely consider in the spot. More cash game viable than anything else, just because he feels like a pretty safe 40, 45 fantasy points.
Yeah, and it's really the front court here for me that I'm looking at. Like, I don't have a lot of interest in, the Reggie Bullocks or Stanley Johnsons tonight. I mean, still getting a fair amount of run. But you mentioned this the other day. I mean, we're starting to see some guys kind of slip into the rotation a little bit more here.
Yeah, you can still take a shot on Reggie Bullock. The minutes still should be pretty solid for him. Like, he's not going to see 40 anymore, but you should be able to get about 30 to 32. And it's a solid matchup here against a Pistons team that really struggles against spot-up shooters, and they struggle to defend the three-point line. The rest of this team, though, like, I think if you're wanting some value options, like Jameer Nelson and James Ennis are two guys that you can look at in tournaments. They're probably not safe enough to roll out in cash games, but both these guys have 20-plus fantasy point upside in this matchup, and they're two guys that are extremely cheap, so I don't mind rolling them out in tournaments.
For a 12-game slate, like, there aren't a ton of punt options on this one.
No, not yet. Like, I'm sure we'll get there. And there is a solid punt option that made it into my tournament article for today's slate. But yeah, there's not a whole lot right now. So I think if you're wanting to take a shot in a good matchup, you could do that with the Ennis and Nelson, and even maybe Anthony Tolliver, just because, like, his minutes aren't going to be way up there. Like, you're not going to get 30 plus minutes out of him, but again, against a team that struggles to defend spot-up shooters and struggles to defend the three-point line, Tolliver could definitely get you there.
Yep. Charlotte-Orlando next game here, 214 total. A game that I'm looking at quite a bit, especially on this Charlotte side. It's going to probably start off with Kemba Walker here, who's been phenomenal of late. He's a guy that I think I'm going to be plugging into quite a bit of lineups, just because I'm really enamored with that kind of point guard range of, like, Damian Lillard, Kemba Walker, Elfrid Payton if Booker sits. Like, there's a lot of options that I'm kind of considering without paying all the way up.
Yeah, you buried the lead here. How can you not just start with the Dwight Howard revenge game?
Because Dwight Howard's revenge games are just like it's lost the lust for me, like, it's just, there's been so many already this year.
You don't love Dwight Howard revenge games on the day of love?
I mean, how many revenge games have we dealt with this year? It's got to be 7 or 8, right, already.
It probably is. I do expect the Dwight Howard revenge game to be a popular narrative today, and I talked about it in the tournament article because Kemba Walker actually made it in as my top tournament player on the slates in a matchup against an Orlando team that ranks 30th in fantasy points allowed to point guards this season. They're just atrocious, and Kemba Walker's been playing out of his freaking mind recently. Like, let's see, averaging 28.4 points in his last 7 games. He's drained 35 with 71 3-point attempts in his past 8. I covered the matchup in the tournament article, but again, I mentioned 30th in fantasy points per game allowed, 27th in defensive efficiency over the last 10. Opposing point guards are shooting 50% from the floor and almost 43% from 3 over that span. They're also really struggling against pick and roll ball handlers. Everything lines up for Kemba Walker to just absolutely crush tonight. And it is a road game, so maybe people will be scared off by his vaunted home road splits.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to overlook the 1.2 fantasy point difference that he scores less away from home this year.
Yeah, that's a huge split right there.
You mentioned the Howard revenge. He's cooled off a little bit, but it's definitely still a guy that I'll be looking to get some exposure to, especially with that price that's back down now. Especially on FanDuel, like 8,300 is not that bad. for a guy or basically for a site that's been pricing up centers quite a bit of late.
Yeah, I do actually have to give FanDuel credit today for the most part. Their pricing is fairly on point, so hopefully it continues for that. But if you want to roll Howard out there, feel free. I think there's obviously some awesome center plays today, but the Howard revenge game narrative is fine to chase. The rest of the Charlotte team, though, like I love everyone on the Charlotte side of this game just because Orlando's been so freaking bad recently. Like, I think Nick Batum coming off a couple bad games is in a great bounce back spot. I think he's an excellent cash and tournament option, given the upside that he's shown in the past. And like Jeremy Lamb is still really cheap and still putting up solid numbers off the bench. And he's a guy that I think on a night where we don't have a ton of mid-range, like mid to lower range value options, I think he can be considered as well.
Yeah, I like the usage there for Lamb. I like the price tag. I love the fact that FanDuel finally moved him over to small forward and got him out of the shooting guard spot, so that helps out a little bit. I feel like you're always kind of looking for a nice value piece there. So, yeah, I like Batum, like Lamb. I don't know how much interest I have in like the Kaminsky's or Gilchrist or Marvin Williams tonight, but do you?
I think they're all like I think Kid Gilchrist and Marvin Williams you can roll out there. I think Kaminsky is probably the cheaper option, especially on FanDuel. He's 3,900 at a power forward position, so I think he's fine in tournaments. Like I think a reasonable expectation for him would come out and put up 24, maybe 25 fantasy points and 21, 22 minutes against this terrible Orlando team. So he has plenty of upside at his price on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's more cash viable.
Yep. Then you look at the Orlando side of things. You're looking to get exposure. I mean, like there's a couple of decent plays, but the prices are coming up a little bit. You were on that Fournier game last time out, put up over 35 fantasy points. Mario Hezonja is another one, should probably still keep going. I doubt we see Gordon or Vucevic here. I don't know why they'd play him right before the break. It makes no sense. I know they've been kind of bouncing around injury reports, but they should not play.
They probably won't, but it's something to definitely keep an eye on. I think Fournier, Simmons, Hezonja, they're all solid options. They're not guys that are really high up on my list, but I think Hezonja, because he's probably going to be a popular option, can be rolled out in cash. And the same with Fournier. Like the Hornets have not been great on defense of late. They are I can't even find it in my notes at this point. They're way too long. But I can say I do know for sure that they've been really bad on defense of late.
28th in defensive efficiency as a team last 10 games.
Yeah. If you want to get exposure to those guys, like I think they're fine cash options. They have struggled against spot up shooters, so that is a spot where you can get some Fournier exposure again, much like against the Chicago Bulls. Like this could be an upside spot for him. And then the Shelvin Mack, DJ Augustine, it's the same as it's probably going to be the rest of the season. Augustine in cash and Mack in tournaments.
Yeah, that's how it goes for me. Ken Birch has played 25 and 24 minutes over his last two games, 18 and 21 fantasy points. Do you have any interest as a cheap option here?
Maybe in tournaments, but I feel like because this is the exact same thing that happened prior to that Houston game, like Birch was starting to play a little bit more minutes and we thought that he was going to see some run, and then Vogel rolls out Spates and Spates eats up all the usage. So or eats up all the minutes. So like, I do feel like it could be a spot where we might get let down by Vogel just, doing something crazy. But if you want to roll him out, feel free.
Miami and Philly next year, 202 over under. These are two teams that have been top 5 in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. I know you and I both really don't have a ton of interest in this one.
No, it's kind of just a gross game. Like I think it's obviously there's the Embiid and Whiteside narrative. Yeah, that's all I got for this game.
I know Adebayo had a big game last time out against Philly, played 29 minutes. His minutes have picked up. I think he'd probably be the only guy that I maybe take a chance on, and probably a little bit more on FanDuel at 5,400 at power forward. I think other than that, I don't really have interest in Dragic tonight. I think he's a little bit too expensive for me. Richardson, and that's kind of about it.
I think Richardson's kind of interesting on DraftKings because he's down to 5,700. That's a fairly solid price for him. He's 6,700 on FanDuel, so I'll definitely pass there. Saric has been playing really well of late, so if you were dying to get exposure to this game, I don't necessarily hate a little bit of Saric exposure. And I think on DraftKings, Simmons is fine in cash games because he's 8,000, and just his ability to rack up, peripherals across the board makes him a pretty solid, cash game option.
I'm a little bummed where we don't want to talk about Mr. Triple Double, TJ McConnell over here.
Yeah, I'm not chasing that. Like, he was like 1% owned in tournaments the other night, and I just want to know, like, if people just randomly click his name or something. I don't know how people ended up on him and his 50 something fantasy points.
I don't know either. I love TJ McConnell because he's a University of Arizona guy. But yeah, I don't play him. You don't need to play him, especially on this slate.
No, there's plenty of solid options on this slate. You don't have to chase the TJ McConnell triple double game.
Yeah. Any other notes you want to talk from this one?
No, I guess maybe if you want the Dwayne Wade narrative, but it's a back-to-back, so he may not even play tonight. But they're talking about putting him back in the starting lineup because he's a Hall of Famer, and you can't just bring Hall of Famers off the bench.
What else are they going to show those 13 Miami fans that show up on a nightly basis?
Well, I mean, there's traffic and the games tip off early, and it's really hard for fans to get to the arena.
And they got to go and get their white jeans and white T-shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and their cigars.
Indiana, Brooklyn next game here. We've seen two huge ceiling games out of Oladipo over the last two. Another spot where he could definitely do the same. Quite a bit of options on this Indiana side. Like, I like the front court and I like their prices. It's really a great spot for like Myles Turner, and I don't hate Thaddeus Young either, who's turned it around of late. Like, Young's a decent cash game guy, but I think Oladipo and Turner are the most interesting.
Yeah, Oladipo's been playing out of his mind recently. You mentioned the two massive upside games out of him, 68 and 60 fantasy points. He's scored at least 30 real points in 3 of his last 4 games. He had 51 fantasy points against Charlotte. It's a great spot for him against Brooklyn here. He's priced up to 9,600 on DraftKings. It's still probably a little too low if you're considering how well he's played recently. He's a fine cash option. I think I'm probably looking other places in tournaments. You mentioned Myles Turner. He made it in my tournament article. I'm not fading Myles Turner. Like, I know he hasn't been great recently. He's actually been like pretty up and down. It's been like a roller coaster for him. But yeah, I'm probably never fading a center against Brooklyn like ever again. It's just they're just going to be like the first person in my lineup. Turner in 3 games against Brooklyn this season, averaging 35 minutes, 43 fantasy points. His team, just centers are just 6xing their salary like almost every single night now. So it's all the Myles Turner for me.
Yeah, and we get him at a nice little bargain here, like 6,800. It's not that bad. Over on FanDuel, 6,800. Like, he's probably going to be my main center just because that's such a nice price. And we've been talking like some of these guys have been priced up a little bit more. Like Steven Adams yesterday on FanDuel was priced up quite a bit. Like the Valanciunas is kind of guys in that range you'd expect to be a little bit cheaper. So yeah, Turner's just a tremendous option here.
Yeah, and FanDuel apparently knew something I didn't because they jacked up Adams' price and he comes out and drops like a freaking 50 burger. So whoopsies.
Yeah. Other guys you have any interest in here? Lance Stevenson playing pretty well. We see Bogdanovich, start to kind of bounce back, and his minutes have been a little bit more stable of late, and he's shooting pretty well, which is always something you need from him.
Yeah, I'm not going to be on Lance tonight. It's an away game, and we know he doesn't like to get up for those games. He likes to play for the home crowd in Indiana, so probably going to be a fade there. But you mentioned Bogdanovich. He's been playing really well recently. It is a revenge game for Bogdanovich, so there's that. It's also a revenge game for Thaddeus Young, so there's that. Both guys, I think, are both viable in all formats. This Brooklyn team, just everybody's just crushing them right now. They're just playing so freaking bad. Like, outside of like defending shooting guards. Like just about everyone else is going off on them at this point in the season. So I wouldn't say no to either one of those guys. And I think because Brooklyn is so bad as far as turning the ball over, allowing opponent blocks and things like that, that gives Thaddeus Young a nice floor. Even at his increased price, I think he's viable in all formats.
Yep. Brooklyn side of things, probably not looking to get a ton of exposure to this Brooklyn side. Indiana's been decent defensively of late. D'Angelo Russell is still interesting to me. Usage rate, I mean, it was 37% against Clippers. He didn't have the huge game, but still 26 fantasy points. He's 6K on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he is 5,500.
He's 55.
Yeah, I like Russell here if I'm taking anyone from Brooklyn.
It's pretty much the same story with Brooklyn as it's going to be the rest of the season. Probably, I think Russell, while he's still priced cheap, is a perfectly fine option, especially considering like he's sharing the court at times with Dinwiddie, which kind of slides him over to the 2. And the Pacers been really, really bad against opposing 2 guards over the last 10 games. They're 27th in defensive efficiency. So, and his usage rate is still through the roof. I didn't pull it for my notes, but I do know it's probably like 33% since he's returned from injury. So he's definitely a fine option. Like the shot attempts and everything else were there for him. Last game, I mean, he had 17 field goal attempts, 7 3-point attempts. Obviously couldn't hit on the 3-pointers, which kind of hurt his value. But, I mean, he still almost got there, even shooting 41% from the floor and 14% from 3. So, fine option there. I wouldn't say no to Dinwiddie, even though the Pacers have been better against opposing point guards. And other than that, like, Allen Crabbe has been lights out. He's averaging like 25.7 points over the last 3 games. He's drained 16 of his 38 attempts from beyond the arc. He's a fine option as well. And then Damari Carroll is always going to be a cash game option for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I'm preferring, it's probably Carroll a little bit, but you mentioned Crabbe, he's a little bit cheaper. You just know Carroll's minutes are always going to be safer, which is why you said he's cash game viable.
Yeah. I mean, if Crabbe's going to keep on hitting his shots, his minutes are going to be safe. Like Atkinson's going to keep rolling him out there if he stays hot from the floor. And I mean, the dude's played 33, 44, 36, 31 minutes over the last 4, 13, 24, 22 field goal attempts. Against the Pelicans and that double overtime game, he attempted 18 3-pointers. He attempted 14 against the Pistons. He's going to keep chucking. Like, I don't necessarily mind rolling him out there and hoping that he can continue.
Yeah. I mean, when you made 16 threes over the last 3 games, it's not too shabby.
No, that's pretty solid.
Yeah. Anyone else on the Brooklyn side?
No. No. I was gonna say maybe Jared Allen, but at his price point, like I think I'd rather go a couple other places.
Yeah. Moving on here, Washington and New York. Washington banged up right now. We're looking at Satoransky questionable, Tim Frazier questionable. Obviously, John Wall's out. Like they're going to be really limited here.
Yeah, Bobby Portis did work on this team, breaking Tim Frazier's nose, and I think he's the one that injured Satoransky too. So like Bobby Portis just ran muckshot all over this team and just smashed everybody's face in. So I think we have to keep an eye on the news here. I think Satoransky is expected to play. I think didn't Frazier have surgery on his nose yesterday or something like that, or day before yesterday? So I don't know how you can play with a freaking busted up nose, but I think it's really hard to break down the Washington side of this game without knowing who's going to be playing, because we even have the Markieff is questionable, Jason Smith is questionable, the Wizards' entire team is questionable at this point.
Yeah, like I mean, I guess we can start with the higher price guys and get into some of the lower potential options. Bradley Beal, I know he's been kind of disappointing in a few games. The game against Chicago, he didn't shoot well. Didn't need to do a whole lot with how Washington was playing. We did see him struggle against Indiana as well, but I don't mind fading in GPPs if he's going to be super popular, because there is a potential that he just kind of maybe goes out for like 30, 35 fantasy points and they kind of cruise to a victory. But if no one's out there, he's still probably going to play 40 minutes.
I don't think he's going to be that popular because of his price. Like I think there's going to be a bunch of pivots that people take, and I think he's definitely a fine option. Like you mentioned, he hasn't shot very well. He's shooting like 24% from the floor over his last 2 games. He's what 10 of 40, so 25%. That's really bad. But the 40 field goal attempts part is nice. And we know the usage is going to be there just without John Wall. He's got well over 30% usage rate, and it changes varying on who you take off the floor in this matchup. If you take Markieff off and you have Satoransky and Frazier there, it's like 35%, 1.23 fantasy points per minute. Those are pretty solid numbers against a Knicks team that is not very good at basketball. So yeah, I think Beal is an excellent cash game option. I think he has plenty of tournament upside, and the assists are what really does it for him. Like this team has really stepped up as far as helping each other. So I'm fine rolling him out in all formats.
Yeah, I don't mind him. Otto Porter's the guy that I'm taking a look at here again, averaging 35 fantasy points over his last 5 games. He is shooting the ball well, 49% over that span. Only 6,900 on Otto Porter, which I feel like is a decent price on him. He's 74 on FanDuel. Playing really well. Good matchup here against the Knicks, who are 26 in defensive efficiency against small forwards over the last 10 games. Porter's probably the guy I'm looking at here. Like, usually I maybe prefer the Oubre route for cheaper, but I'm not a huge fan of Oubre jumping into the starting lineup. I prefer him kind of off the bench.
Yeah, I think Porter's fine. I don't necessarily mind the matchup for him. Obviously, you mentioned 26 in defensive efficiency for the Knicks over the last 10 games, and he has a solid usage rate. If you take just Markieff off the floor, it's 25%, 1.05 fantasy points per minute. It kind of hovers around those same numbers if you take Markieff and Satoransky or Frazier or whoever else may be out for this game off the floor. So he's an excellent option, plenty of upside even at that price. I still don't mind Kelly Oubre just because his defensive stats help get him there, especially over on FanDuel where you get the bonus, obviously. So you could definitely go there. It still just depends on who's in and who's out. If Jason Smith is able to suit up and Markieff isn't, I think Jason Smith is an excellent option against this Knicks team that's really struggled in its power forwards recently. Satoransky, if he's able to go, is an excellent option. I mean, we just saw freaking TJ McConnell put up a freaking triple-double against this team, and Satoransky's been playing really well recently. His price still really fair. He's 5,200 on DraftKings. Like, I don't know what he has to do to get his price to come up, but like he's been freaking solid lately. 43 fantasy points last game, 30 before. Like he's starting to come into his own. So this Washington side is really, really intriguing. It just, again, we just kind of have to wait and see who's in and who's out.
Yeah, if Morris and potentially Smith sit, you got Mike Scott. I mean, Mike Scott, saw 24 minutes in the last time out without Morris. I know that game, turned into a little bit of a blowout, I guess, but they only won by 11. We see Scott, he's got a huge usage rate when he's on the floor. 3,600, like on FanDuel and Power Forward. Like if you're going stars and scrub, I don't think he's the worst play in the world.
Yeah, I definitely meant to say Mike Scott. I think I mentioned Jason Smith as a guy that was in play if Keefe was out, and I definitely meant to say Mike Scott because Jason Smith is terrible at basketball, and I don't actually think he's in play. Definitely meant to say Mike Scott there. 4,300 on DraftKings. It's a solid price for him. He's 36 on FanDuel. Like if Markieff Morris is out, like Mike Scott at 3,600 on FanDuel, that's like a lock and load.
Gortat is just it's Valentine's Day. He's probably going to break my heart tonight. Maybe I'm chasing here a little bit, but he's a cheap option. He's played well against the Knicks before. If you can get out there and get, 25, 30 minutes, like at those prices, I think he can provide. Because obviously, we've seen the Knicks struggle a little bit against opposing bigs of late.
Yeah, I think in tournaments, I'm definitely going to another center that we'll get to a little bit later on, who's probably going to break my heart. But if you want to chase Gortat, feel free. Just know that there's going to be a Gortat letdown game coming. It's going to happen.
Can I take a guess on who that is?
Feel free.
Is he in the same price range?
He is.
Is it Brook Lopez?
It is.
Yeah, well, we'll get to him in a little. On the Knicks side of things here, I mean, Michael Beasley, like he just seemingly becomes basically the Knicks, like he's the DFS guy right now. I don't mind going that way. Usage rate's still going to be fairly solid. We know the mints are going to be there without Porzingis for the rest of the year. Even at climbing prices, like I still don't mind him. He's been over 30 fantasy points in each of the last 3 games. I don't mind targeting power forwards against Washington either.
No, and I don't really care what starting lineup comes out 30 minutes before lock because it's probably going to change 5 minutes after lock, and Beasley's going to be in the starting lineup. Like, even if he's coming off the bench, like I think he's still a solid option, and he's not someone that you really want to fade in the spot against a Washington team that's really struggled against wings for the majority of the season. We know the usage rate is there, the scoring is there, especially since Tim Hardaway Jr. got broke by Giannis a few games ago. There's not a lot of talent on this New York Knicks team. Like I posted it on Twitter yesterday. It came up on my Facebook on this day feed yesterday on Facebook. Apparently 3 years ago, I was watching the Celebrity All-Star game, and I posted on Facebook that there was more talent in the Celebrity All-Star game than there was on the entire Knicks team. And the same thing applies this day. This Knicks team does not have much talent without Kristaps there. Beasley is pretty much all they have. So, yeah, Beasley's pretty much just a free square on the night.
Yeah, he's the only Knick that I really have interest in. I know Cantor's been playing well, but there's just other centers at the price tag or cheaper that I'm really looking at for more just because – Cantor's ceiling's probably right around 30, 40 fantasy points. He doesn't do a whole lot of defensive stuff. You just got to basically hope he scores and get some boards. And I'm probably looking for a little bit more on this slate.
I will say this, the Washington Wizards are giving up 13.9 second chance points to opponents, and we know Cantor excellent on the offensive glass, so that could help his ceiling. So if you wanted to roll Cantor out there, I think you can. The rest of these guys, though, like I mentioned, Tim Hardaway Jr., basically since getting posterized and completely leapfrogged by Giannis, 3 games ago, he's shooting like 20-something% from the floor. Yeah, I'm not going there tonight. And then the point guard roulette, like we saw Moutier play, he played 29 minutes against the Pacers, and then the next night he played 19. Jarrett Jack played 8 the first night and like 18 the next night. Ntilikina played 21 minutes. He's 1 fantasy point for Ntilikina last game. Like that's an impressive stat line. 21 minutes, 1 fantasy point. I'm not going there for him either. And if you want to take a shot on Moutier in tournaments, feel free, because we do know he has plenty of upside, but his price is starting to climb. And he's at the mercy of Hornacek and him doing like a freaking roulette wheel with his point guard minutes.
There's a hot little guy out there that maybe some people should take a look at, and it's Washington's already ahead of the curve here, and it's Ty Lawson. I can't believe it. I saw that yesterday, and I could not believe it.
Well, they're also talking about Derrick Rose and all these other guys, so. I just not like this, Washington. Not like this.
Drunk Ty Lawson or sober Derrick Rose? Who would you rather have right now?
Drunk Ty Lawson.
I think so too. That's sad. Clippers Celtics next game here. 210 over under. This is a televised game here, which I guess can make a little bit of an impact. But Clippers side of things, I actually have a decent amount of interest in some of these guys. I think just given Boston's defense has slipped a little bit. I'm going to start probably here with Gallinari. He's been probably my favorite Clipper to use over the last maybe week or so. It's also a spot that we've seen Boston kind of drop off of defensively. Gallinari's just at a solid price. Like the minutes have climbed really outside of the Detroit game where they dropped a little bit, but I think you can expect kind of mid-30s here. Does a little bit of everything, can rebound. You mentioned this the other day, does get to the line quite a bit. Prices aren't bad either.
Yeah, he's a guy that's been really good. He's averaging 20.2 points in 6 games since returning from that glute injury. You mentioned the minutes, 40 and 35 in the last 2 games, 28 against Detroit, 34 against Dallas. So the minutes are solid. The field goal attempts have been solid for him as well. He's shooting pretty well. Boston over the last 10 games, 28th in defensive efficiency against small forwards. He's an excellent option. I like him. Pretty much in all formats, especially like FanDuel. He's 6,300. That's still a really solid price. There's a few guys in the same price range that might be slightly overpriced, but like he's definitely a good option there. I do wonder. Doc Rivers was in attendance for the Cleveland game, and he talked about how he got to scout the Celtics and whatnot, and how he felt it was really good for him, and he hopes he can do it more. So maybe he's going to have like some secret stuff drawn up for this game. So maybe the Clippers could be the GPP stack of the night, and you could get some Gallinari and maybe some DeAndre Jordan or something against this Celtics team.
Yeah, like I like Gallinari here. I think Jordan's an intriguing option. I don't think Jordan's going to be really that popular, even coming off back-to-back strong games. We've seen Boston struggle against kind of traditional centers, especially like Jordan, the ones who do rebound well. Like I could see this being a game. We also know that Boston can shoot very, very poorly. And Jordan would eat up a ton of rebounds.
Yeah, like I think in my notes, it's basically like DeAndre Jordan is an excellent GPP option. I'm still probably going like Myles Turner over him, but Myles Turner probably will have a significantly higher ownership than Jordan. And then Lou Williams, I think he's a fine option in cash games, especially where his price is starting to come down. Like he's 6,800 on DraftKings. That's a huge price dip compared to what it was just last game. He was 7,600. He's 7K on FanDuel. I'm sure he was like 9,400 last game. So he's like with his price starting to climb, like his usage is still solid. I mean, he's 30% usage rate over the last 5 games. So I think he's fine as well. Like I think you could get exposure to Lou Williams and Gallinari and maybe some DeAndre and be pretty solid in the spot.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind Tobias Harris in cash games either. He's pretty solid floor, has done well against the Celtics this year, with his time in Detroit. He'd be another one. I probably wouldn't use him in GPPs. I think, 25, 30 fantasy points is probably where he's going to fall tonight.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would put him as well. So he's definitely a guy that I would feel a little bit more comfortable with in cash.
Yeah, and I don't have any real interest in like Austin Rivers on this slate. I think I'm going to go some different directions. Decent minutes guy, decent floor, but like there's a couple other options I think I'm going to look at for higher upside.
I was about to look and see how he's done against this team in the past because
I know he didn't play against them earlier this year.
Yeah, I didn't know if maybe there was some like hatred in his heart for his dad's former team or something, but I'm not going to chase that. I'm not going to chase that narrative. He's still pretty cheap though, so I mean, I don't necessarily mind going there if you're dying to get exposure to Austin freaking Rivers.
No one should be doing that.
Probably not.
Boston side of things here, Marcus Smart's still out. I don't really have a lot of interest in the Boston side. They're not a huge upside team. And on this slate, like I'm just going to be probably looking at other directions in this price range. So I just don't have the interest in like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. I think Al Horford's kind of interesting, but like he kind of fits in the same boat where I think I'm just going to be looking other directions.
How dare you say Scary Terry doesn't have upside?
Yeah, he's fine. I mean, the Cleveland game was terrific, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to chase the Scary Terry upside game here. Price is down a little bit. He was like 7,300 a few games ago. But yeah, I'm not going to go there. I think Kyrie's definitely interesting, especially given how Boston's playing. Like, I think he's probably going to come out and try to, kind of shoulder the offense and carry this team to a win heading into the break. So I don't necessarily mind him. I think you can use him in all formats. You mentioned Jaylen Brown. Clippers have been really bad against opposing shooting guards this season. So if you wanted to take a tournament flyer there, but I think Horford's definitely the guy that I have the most interest in beyond Kyrie. And this is just a spot the Clippers been 21st in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against opposing centers. So I think he's definitely interesting here. But other than that, like I think most of my interest in this game is on the LA side of this.
Yeah, me too. It's basically Irving and Horford that I would get exposure to, and I don't hate Brown, especially FanDuel. He's only 5,600. Like he's a guy who can notch a couple steals here and there, but I don't know. He's either going to get you like 15 or 30.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I can't believe we didn't talk about No, I'm not. Never mind. I'm not going to do it.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Lakers in New Orleans, 229 over under here. Starting with this Lakers side that have been playing well. And we look at a lot of these guys here. Julius Randle's been playing out of his mind of late. I'm going to be going back to the well there, even at higher price tags.
I think he's probably priced out of like a bunch of upside in this spot. But like I think in cash games, he's still definitely a good option. Like I know he just put up 44 fantasy points last game out, but
for me, it's probably more FanDuel at 7K than it is DraftKings because DraftKings you have DeAndre Jordan, you have Horford, and you have a couple other guys in that range.
See, I'm not doing it on FanDuel because he's only center eligible on FanDuel.
Well, we'll just agree to disagree here.
Like I said, I think in cash games it's fine. I think on DraftKings, I like him a little bit more because he's power forward eligible, and I don't have to eat up my only center spot. So maybe there. I don't know what his price is on Fantasy Draft. I haven't even looked over there today, but he could be in play over there. But I have to go with my boy Brook Lopez. Like I can't. I wrote him up in the tournament article, and he has to be my guy. Like I have to stick with Brook Lopez here, who's been playing really well recently. The minutes have been solid for him, and the Pelicans not good against opposing centers recently. They're 22nd defensive efficiency, and let's see, they're giving up 50.2 rebounds, and 111.7 points per game over the last 10 games. 15 second chance points, 47.6 points in the paint. I think Lopez is going to absolutely crush here, and he's going to be a guy that I have a bunch of exposure to.
Yeah, I mean, minutes are back for Lopez. I mean, averaging 27 over the last 5 games. Price is definitely nice. It's a Lakers team. I mean, there's probably, 5 viable options you can use tonight here, maybe even 6. I like the backcourt. I like KCP here tonight. I think he's an interesting play. The minutes were kind of trending down. He did play 30 and 35 over the last 2 games. We finally saw back-to-back strong games out of him. This is an interesting spot, especially if those steals continue. He's had 7 over the last 30 games, 8 over the last 4.
Yeah, I need to look and see. Didn't they released the starting lineup for this team yesterday? And I swear it was. I'm kidding. I got to scroll through all the news feeds from yesterday. He was still in the starting lineup, I believe, but I think they were going to start Ingram, KCP, and Hart. My news feed is ridiculous, but yeah, I think this is a good spot for him. We know the Pelicans struggling against spot up shooters, especially, and it's a spot where like KCP doesn't do it isn't a great spot up shooter, 66th percentile, but he's spotting up on 21% of his possessions, averaging about 3 points per game. So he's a fine option. I mentioned Josh Hart. It's Valentine's Day, so there's the Hart narrative, maybe.
Boy.
I for the life of me, there it is. Okay, so Ingram, Caldwell Pope, Hart, Randall, Lopez on Wednesday. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to make sure KCP was still in the starting lineup. I don't know why they wouldn't do it, but it is Luke Walton. But like, I'm not going to chase Josh Hart here and his like 11% usage rate. Like we saw what happens last game. Now that like Isaiah Thomas is there, like Hart plays 30 minutes and puts up 14 fantasy points. I'm not going there. I do love KCP as well. Isaiah Thomas, feel free. He's got hatred in his heart for the entire NBA, and he's on a mission. He had what, 30 or 28.6% usage rate off the bench, but he played like the entire fourth quarter last game. He's going to continue to come out and chuck and put up decent numbers. So priced probably not where it should be in a good matchup against a Pelicans team that has also struggled against point guards this season.
Yeah, I don't mind him. He's out of Cleveland. He's back to being fantasy viable. I like, a few other guys I do like Brandon Ingram. Mance are going to be there. I know New Orleans hasn't been bad against small forwards this year. But Ingram's obviously an interesting play just at his price. I think 6,500 on FanDuel, so a guy that I'm going to be looking cash games, I think for sure, just given the fact that the minutes and probably a pretty safe 30 fantasy point floor is going to be there. 67 on DK, I might go with a little bit cheaper, like Gallinari, and save some cash. I think Kuzma is interesting on DraftKings, where he's a whole $1,000 cheaper than over on FanDuel, where Kuzma's 6,900. Back-to-back monster games. I think I'm still going to be looking at GPPs though.
Yeah, I do have to correct you. Brandon Ingram, he's not small forward anymore. He is the team's point guard whenever he's out there starting alongside KCP and Hart. Like that is his role now. Like he's listed as a starting point guard. So he's gonna get Rondo defense.
Oh, even better.
And it's against a Pelicans team that's not great at defending the rim, which is an area where he likes to really attack. So I think he has plenty of upside in this matchup. You mentioned Kuzma, excellent spot for him. He is sharing the court with Isaiah Thomas off the bench, but still in the spot. I mean, without Nance and without Clarkson there on the floor, it's 26% usage rate, 1.01 fantasy points per minute. We've seen back-to-back solid outings out of this guy. I mean, 37 against OKC, 41 against Dallas. It's definitely a good spot for him too. So I think Kuzma's in play. He's probably my third favorite option behind Lopez and Thomas.
And I think you can probably tell by this game, this is one that you probably want to get exposure to, given that we spent, I think, 10 minutes on the Lakers so far.
Yeah. And it sucks that the Lakers are like, it's not like the late night game, because like usually these Lakers games are late night hammers, and so like I'm super excited about getting it now. This one just falls in the middle of the slate, and I'm just like,
Really? Come on, you got to be more excited than that.
I don't know. I like the late night hammers, so I like when the Lakers are the late night game.
It is nice. Let's move to New Orleans here. We'll start with Anthony Davis. Once again, like I don't know. I feel like we can just say the same thing about him. Like the usage is going to be high. The minutes are going to be there. Still continue to take a ton of shots. It's a matchup where he can thrive in as well.
Yeah. Newsflash: Anthony Davis is good at basketball. He has a really high ceiling and a really high floor and a really high usage rate, and taking a bunch of shot attempts and rebounding the ball and doing all kinds of stuff and racking up lots of fantasy points.
Sums it up. Let's look at Nikola Mirotic here. Came off the bench in that last game against Detroit. That was the highest usage that he had in New Orleans so far. He's obviously shown great upside. I don't mind going here. He's rebounding really, really well. Maybe I don't expect the 5 block game like he had against Brooklyn, but I mean, he's been showing fantastic upside in New Orleans.
Yeah, and he's free to like focus on basketball now that he doesn't have to worry about dodging punches from his own teammates.
The Wizards do now.
The Wizards do. Yeah, it's a great spot for him. You mentioned him coming off the bench. I like him a little bit more coming off the bench. We've seen, like, this is now the second game that he's come off the bench for this team. The first one was against Minnesota. He played 35 minutes, put up 48 fantasy points. And then against Detroit, came off the bench again, 43 fantasy points in 29 minutes. He's going to have a really high usage rate off the bench. And this is a Lakers team. Like, they have been a little bit better of late, but they're still 23rd in defensive efficiency against power forwards over the last 10 games, and they're still not a great rebounding team. So the upside is really, really high for Mirotic. And if you're going to fade the Anthony Davis side of the Pelicans, I think Mirotic is the clear-cut way to get exposure.
Rondo playing well. Minutes have been back up. You hopping on here? You've been on? Are you hopping off?
It's not a national televised game, is it?
No, it's for some reason it's it's the Clippers and Celtics at the same time. It's a bummer.
Yeah, so probably not. He's always going to be a tournament option for me, just because there are nights where the minutes aren't going to be there. I mean, we saw it against Philly, only 25 minutes, but Utah, 30 minutes, solid performance. He's alternated big games now for like the last 5 or 6 games. It's been good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. He's coming off just a mediocre game, so maybe this is the Rondo like 50 fantasy point triple double game. So yeah, tournament exposure only for me here.
Drew Holiday, do you have any interest here? He's come off a big game. I think I might be looking other directions, but I don't hate the play. Lakers have been better against 2 guards of late. It could be a little bit of a tough spot here for Holiday.
It really could be. I don't know that I'm going to chase the big game, especially at the elevated price tag. Like, there's a lot of guys in that same, like, within a few hundred of him that I think I would rather have. But if he's another guy, if you wanted to get exposure there, feel free. But I think, like, this Pelican side, I'd rather get exposure to Mirotic, who's significantly cheaper than Holiday.
Yeah, I would too. And it's basically the big 4 there that I'm interested in. Like, I don't have a lot of interest in any of the bench guys or guys that may start the game, but just see like a usage that's below 10%.
Yeah. I mean, it should be noted, like, Emeka Okafor had 8 and 7 in 13 minutes against the Pistons. Like, this is a decent spot for big men. He's really, really cheap still. Like, if you're dying for value at the center position, you could probably do worse, but like it's also not 2012, so Emeka Okafor probably not going to put up a huge game.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Anyone else here?
No.
Toronto, Chicago next here, 218 total. Toronto favored by only 6.5. Maybe it's just partial to the back-to-back and be on the road. Chicago looking to get Chris Dunn back tonight. He's probable for tonight's game. Is there any way Chicago keeps this thing close? Because it's much like last night, where that's going to kind of determine how I use Toronto. And I kind of feel like Toronto blows them out, and I'm going to be looking at, like, the Fred VanVleet and other guys here again.
I'm looking at those guys anyways, so it doesn't really matter if they do blow them out. Like, I mean, this bench is still playing really, really well. They're still playing a decent amount of minutes. Like, I think last night was the first night in like the last 5 games that any of the starters saw over 30 minutes. And of course, Lowry crushed in that spot. Like, I think if you're looking at the Toronto side of this game, if you want to get some exposure to Lowry, who's still really, really cheap in a beautiful matchup, like, feel free. The same goes for DeMar DeRozan, who's priced 8,400 on DraftKings, like in a spot where he's crushed in 3 games this season. Like, I don't necessarily mind going there, but like my strategy for the Toronto side of this game is still going to be getting exposure to some of the bench guys, and that starts with DeLon Wright, who made it into my tournament article. I know, like, he did have a huge game against the Chicago team the last time they played. It was like something like 24 minutes and 60 fantasy points. But if you eliminate that game and just look at the other 2 matchups, like, he's still averaging over a fantasy point per minute against this team. So if you kind of adjust for the excellent matchup and you're looking at, him getting maybe 21, 22, 23 minutes, he should be able to get you 24, 25 fantasy points in the spot. And at 3,900, that's pretty solid return on value.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. I think it's going to be those guards for me, like over DeRozan and Lowry. Like, I'm no fault to you if you want to go, because it is such a good spot. I kind of just prefer like the Kyries and Kembas, I think, and Lillard kind of over Lowry tonight.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way, especially considering, I mentioned the late night hammer and Lillard is in the late night game, so I'm probably going to pivot there. But 7,400 for Lowry is still really cheap, and he's 76 on FanDuel, so that's still a really solid price for him.
Any interest in Valanciunas or Ibaka? The funny thing is Valanciunas played 30 minutes last night, and then like his points severely dropped.
Yeah, it's a good spot for him. Like, he's actually been really solid against this team in the past, but I'm not gonna go there. Like, there's just so many other center options. Like 6,400 on DraftKings. Like, Myles Turner is 400 more. He's 7,100 on FanDuel. Like, Myles Turner is cheaper over there. There's other guys I'd rather go. So probably not chasing that game. Serge Ibaka is a fine cash option. He's coming off his first double-double since since January 26th. So it's a good spot for him. But other than that, like I said, I'm still targeting the bench guards, and that's probably it.
Yep. On the Chicago side of things, I don't know how much interest I have in the Chicago side. Chris Dunn back tonight. I'm curious to see how that kind of works out with Levine. I don't know how much I have. Like, I feel like Markkanen and Portis are a little bit overpriced for me on tonight's slate. Like, I'm going to be looking other directions. So I think I'm actually just kind of off Chicago here.
I am for the most part. I think Robin Lopez, again, another fairly cheap center option, is a little bit interesting against a Toronto team that ranks 20th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against centers, and he's averaging like a fantasy point per minute against this team in the last 3 games. So he's really cheap over on DraftKings at 4,400. He is 45 on FanDuel, so I think he's interesting as a cash game option and maybe even in a sprinkle in tournaments. But I'm not really looking anywhere else from the Chicago side of this game.
And how much would you pay to see Ibaka throw down with Portis?
I would pay a lot. That would be pretty fun to watch. Like Ibaka, if for people who haven't seen Ibaka in real life, he is a very large dude and he is freaking built like a brick shit house. Like he is jacked. So that would be interesting to watch.
Sacramento, that's for our MMA DFS pod. We'll say that for later. Sacramento and Houston next game here, both these teams on the back-to-back. I don't have a lot of interest in this game. I think Houston blows them out. Sacramento, I think you can take some shots on because I still think guys like, Fox and Hield and Bogdanovich are going to get their run no matter what. That's kind of where I'm headed, I think, with this Kings side if I'm taking anyone, but I'm not super thrilled with this game.
No, I'm not really either. And quick note, Tim Frazier has been ruled out for today's game. So that's Washington news. They're coming at us a little bit early. Yeah, you mentioned blowout risk. Like there is a chance this game stays close, but it's probably not likely. I don't mind Willie Cauley-Stein in this matchup. It's still a solid spot for him. Coming off a mediocre game, 2 straight mediocre games, I thought Dallas would be a game for him, but it really wasn't. But against this Houston team last time out, 10 of 15 from the floor, 31 minutes, 42 fantasy points. So it's a solid spot for him. So I don't mind going there. I would expect maybe Zach Randolph to play fewer minutes in a paced up game. Like he's probably going to collapse on the court trying to keep pace with Houston. So maybe that spells more minutes for Kosta Koufis, who you can take a shot on in tournaments as well. He's just a solid fantasy point per minute producer, but it's mostly Willie Cauley-Stein and Bogdanovich, who is still too cheap for the upside that he has, especially in a matchup like this. And Buddy Hield, I think, is interesting as far as tournaments go because we know Houston struggles against spot-up shooters.
Yeah, so I think Sacramento's the blowout risk doesn't really stand so much with Sacramento. It's more with the Houston guys and their price tags. You want to move over to Houston here?
Yeah, well, actually, Justin Jackson it's really, really gross to consider using him, but his minutes have been solid recently. Production has been there coming off a decent game against Dallas. He looks really excited in his DraftKings picture, so there you go.
I want guys happy to be playing. I don't want guys out there who are just miserable.
Yeah, there's someone else. I think it was from the first game. Andre Drummond's DraftKings picture. He's just get me the hell out of here. It's the most uninterested picture I've ever seen. But that's not reliable analysis at all. But again, Justin Jackson is at least a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Houston side of things, I don't want to say ceilings are capped at the blowout, but I think ceilings are capped at the blowout.
Yeah, so that means James Harden's dropping 90 and Chris Paul's dropping 50.
I think if I want some exposure, I think Clint Capella is a guy that I might look at for some exposure here.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Obviously, we know Sacramento really, really bad against opposing centers, and Clint Capella went 10 of 12 with 17 boards and 22 points in 28 minutes against his team last time out. So he's definitely in play here. And obviously, you can never say no to James Harden and Chris Paul. Like, if this game does blow out, it's because one of those two probably had a big game last night. It was James Harden, and Chris Paul just kind of took a back seat. Maybe that changes tonight. And maybe we see like Mike D'Antoni just pull some crazy stuff and rest one of these guys.
Yeah, that's one thing I think to keep an eye on. And for some reason, I think the resting is probably going to come more towards the later games than anything. Especially OKC on the back-to-back, possibly some nagging injuries for some of those guys, the Houston guys, Golden State. Like, we could see some big names rest, and that would open things up. And if we get like a Paul out or a Harden out, like that immediately makes the other much more playable.
Yeah, it definitely does. And then if one of these guys is ruled out, maybe we see extra minutes for Gerald Green or Eric Gordon.
Eric Gordon's so cheap.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, there's a reason for it, but like he's still really, especially on FanDuel, he's still really, really cheap. But like he's also been really.
You'll play
really,
him though. He'll play 10 minutes and then limp off the court. So
probably it's injured back season for Eric Gordon.
And that's season with an S, Z, and N.
Yeah, season. Brandon Wright may get some minutes tonight. I know he didn't end up playing last night. I don't think. I'm over on FanDuel, and of course he's not in player pool, so I can't look and see. Is he in the player pool for on DraftKings either? Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he didn't play last night.
He didn't play last night. He may start getting some runs soon, so it's just something to keep an eye on. Joe Johnson hasn't signed with the team because they haven't been able to release Troy Williams yet, so you don't have to necessarily worry about him. But like I said, Brandon Wright is someone that may eat into some minutes for some of these guys. So not really interested in anyone else, and I'm not chasing the Ryan Anderson game.
No, I'm not either. Yeah, it's pretty much Capella for me if everyone's healthy. And playing tonight. If not, then obviously I think you can look at the other star, whoever's not sitting, if that's the case.
For sure.
So, OKC Memphis 208. We saw OKC, win 110-92 without Melo and OKC, or without Melo and Westbrook the other night. Paul George put on that show. I think they can blow them out here again. I don't really have a ton of interest with everyone back unless someone sits.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to sit. Billy Donovan said he doesn't expect anybody, or prior to last night's game, he said he doesn't expect these guys to be on a minutes limit or anything like that. He expects them to be a full go. So they should be good to go. If you want to roll Westbrook out there, feel free. It's obviously a good spot against a Memphis team that's been really bad against point guards over the last 10 games, or 26 in the defensive efficiency. And we obviously know Westbrook has the ability to break an entire slate. So if you want to roll him out, go for it. Other than that, though, like I'm not terribly intrigued in anyone else from this game. I learned my lesson yesterday. I'm never going to say no to Steven Adams if someone asks me if he's in play, but he's not a guy that I'm heavily targeting tonight. And that's pretty much it from OKC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really looking at Paul George at a higher price. I don't mind him, but I think there's other directions in that price range I'm going with. Melo, I don't have any interest in. Yeah, this game in general is just not really too appealing, and there's even less options for me on the Memphis side because I don't think I'm considering anyone here.
I will say Melo at 6K is a little bit interesting. Like he's 6K on FanDuel and on DraftKings. I mean, he was really solid in this matchup last time out, 21 points, 9 rebounds. I think he's tournament viable. Like at 6K, he needs 35, 36 fantasy points to get you there. Like he could definitely do that. Like 2 of his last 3 games, if we take the Golden State game out where he got hurt, he's 34 fantasy points, 37 fantasy points. So I think tournaments, Melo is definitely a little bit interesting, but that's really it.
Memphis, do you have any interest here?
Tyreek and Gasol are fine options. Obviously, we know the usage is going to be dominated by those two. Tyreek, first game back, last time out, 26 minutes, 21 fantasy points, did not play very well. I would expect him to start to get a little bit more run as he's eased back into things. And then obviously Marc Gasol is Marc Gasol, and he could put up a big game pretty much any time, but they're not guys that I'm like, my heart is not set on putting them in my lineups.
Yeah, I think the only guy that potentially would make his way into my lineup in like a stars and scrubs is Jarell Bartnick. If JaMychal Green sits. He's questionable with an illness tonight. That'd probably be the only way for me, because I mean he's 3,700 on FanDuel. He is.
Yeah, he's 43 on DraftKings, so that's probably a no there.
Yeah, that's a little too pricey, but FanDuel, I think he'd be in play.
Yeah, I don't disagree there.
Move on here.
Please.
Phoenix and Utah still dealing with some questionable tags. Devin Booker questionable, Tyson Chandler questionable, Tyler Ulis is probable. I will say Elfrid Payton has been excellent for fantasy here in his 2 games with Phoenix so far.
Yeah, and quick notes, the Orlando Magic will be without Aaron Gordon and Nikola Vucevic. Oh, shocker. Shocker. They're not going to play in the last
Injury report rankings going up.
Yeah, Elfrid Payton absolutely crushing the last 2 games. Like, what did he come out in like the first 6 minutes of the Golden State game? He had like 24 fantasy points, ended with like 42. So kind of let people down. He didn't keep pace. It's like 100 fantasy point pace, but it is an interesting spot here against Utah. They have been a little bit. Oh, they're now second in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. So
they fell bad too. Like
they fell one spot.
But for some reason, I looked. Maybe it was last week, and I feel like they were kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, I think they were last week, but I think that was like before their 10-game winning streak started, and like they're only allowing 97.1 points per game over the last like 10 games. So, but like Elfrid's a guy. I think I pulled it last night, and like a couple of his games against Utah, he's absolutely demolished them. So if you want to roll him out, feel free. I think Bender's pretty much the only guy from the Utah side of things that I have interest in. I did have interest in Tyson Chandler the last time these teams played, and he played like he played 18 minutes in the first half and put up 16 fantasy points, and they didn't see the court in the second half because Bender was just going bananas, and he put up like 43 fantasy points against this team. We know Utah struggling against centers recently. They're 28th in defensive efficiency, so I think Bender's a very, very interesting tournament option here.
Yeah, still cheap. Has that upside as we've seen. I definitely prefer him as like the cheaper option. I know Josh Jackson's prices come down a little bit. The minutes will still be there if Booker's out. I don't know how much I'm going to get exposure to him, but I think he's still in play.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, especially on DraftKings, 5,700. That's still a fair price for him. He is.
He's only 55 on FanDuel.
That's definitely interesting. I mean, this isn't a terrible matchup for him. Like, I mean, he went 7 of 18 from the floor, 20 points, 29 fantasy points the last time these teams faced, and he didn't really have any other peripherals. So if you expect him to be able to grab a couple more boards, maybe an assist or two, and maybe a block or steal, I think he's definitely someone that could have an upside game. So I don't necessarily mind going there either, but it's mostly just Bender and maybe some Elfrid for me. Yeah.
Utah side of things, a couple of guys in play here. I know Ricky Rubio is still questionable. We've seen Donovan Mitchell, excellent. Question for you real quick, because I feel like this is a question everyone's asking. Is Donovan Mitchell an easy call for Rookie of the Year here?
I think at this point he's pretty darn close, yes. Like, I mean, I know Simmons struggled at times earlier last month, but he's still been playing really well. Like, I think Mitchell is pretty close to being a lock, but I think Simmons, they're pretty much neck and neck.
Yeah. We look at Mitchell here. Last 3 games he's been stellar. Rubio didn't play in about 2.5 of those. We've seen the usage rate over 30% each of the last 3 games. I mean, 20 plus field goal attempts in each of the last 3. I'm going back to the well here against this Phoenix team that he absolutely crushed, basically 10 games or 10 days ago or something like that. So, I mean, I have no problem using Mitchell at his higher price tags. I don't care.
I mean, I think he's in play at this point in this matchup, even if Rubio is able to go. I will say this: it's kind of disappointing that Mitchell can't like hit a freaking shot. Like Isaiah Thomas must have like rubbed off on him during one of the matchups against Cleveland or something, because like he can't. Was he 32% last game, 41%, 38%, 33%, 16%? Like he's unable to hit a shot. And my Slack chat's going crazy because there's news coming out, but yeah, Mitchell's in play, cash tournaments, no matter what Rubio's status is. I think you can definitely roll him out. And Jason Smith is out for for tonight's game.
You don't get to play him. Damn.
Satoransky is questionable, and where is the other one? Markieff Morris is questionable. So,
all right.
Yeah.
I think we should talk Derrick Favors here next. Big upside the last 2 games, a great spot against Phoenix. We love targeting everyone against Phoenix, but power forwards especially here. He had 25 points in 24 minutes last time out against Phoenix in what was a huge blowout. Price just hasn't come up. Like, he's still too cheap for me.
Yeah, I wrote him up in the tournament article. Like, this is a guy, I mean, he's 5,700 on DraftKings. He's 58 on FanDuel. Like, he's got 35.75 fantasy points in back-to-back games. Usage rate is solid. Point per minute production is solid with Rubio. Even with Rubio on the court, like, he's still putting up solid numbers. It's like right around 20% usage and like a little over 1 fantasy point per minute. But if you take Rubio off, it's 21% and 1.13 fantasy points per minute. We know that the Suns really struggle against power forwards. So, oh man, Joel Embiid is questionable. So yeah, Favors is a guy. He's definitely a core guy for me, and he's just been playing so well recently. Like it's really tough to fade him in the spot. So I do like him a lot. I think on FanDuel, like my 2 top power forwards, assuming news doesn't like change things, is going to be like Favors and Mirotic, and DraftKings Favors is going to be right there as well.
What are you doing with Joe Ingles here, who's red hot from the field, has surprisingly come with some peripheral stats of late. Over 35 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games. He's been okay against Phoenix this year. You going back to the well here?
If Rubio is out, I will. But like, it's not his holiday. Like jingle bells. Like, he's a Christmas guy. Like, I don't know if I want my holidays to overflow. I don't want Christmas taking over Valentine's Day here, but I mean, if Rubio's out, I'll go back. If Rubio plays, like, I don't think I would pay those prices for him here.
No, I think you can look at Jake Crowder for cheaper if you want some exposure. 28, 30 minutes. He's seeing right around a 21% usage rate in Utah off the bench. Still pretty cheap. Like, I wasn't really on him the other night against San Antonio. He played 33 minutes, 20 fantasy points. He's not going to be a huge fantasy points per minute player. That's just not his game. But viable option if you need someone cheap.
Yeah, he's got 11 field goal attempts in back-to-back games. His first 2 games with Utah, he's still really cheap, so I don't mind that. And if Rubio's out, I don't mind maybe hopping in the Rolls Royce and getting some O'Neal exposure.
Yeah, I don't either. I kind of got burned by Gobert. I was expecting a bigger ceiling game out of him the last time these 2 played because he has historically crushed Phoenix in the past. I think there's just a lot of other center options I might see because I think his game is probably going to be right around what he's been producing of late.
Yeah, like he's almost 8K on FanDuel. He's 76 on DraftKings. There's so many center options tonight that are in excellent spots. Like, it's going to be tough to justify using him over like the Capellas and the Dwights and the Lopez's and Randalls and all these other guys.
And especially if you're using Favors, like it doesn't make much sense to use both of them here for me.
Exactly.
So. Moving on, last game of the night, Golden State and Portland, televised game. Golden State, they're not without Steve Kerr. Sorry, they were just letting other players coach instead of Steve Kerr. Which I don't have a problem with it at all.
Well, I was actually going to let you take over the whiteboard duties today, but like I heard that like anybody can just handle whiteboard duties, and I didn't want to exacerbate that narrative, and I didn't want to offend anybody by letting someone else take over the whiteboard narrative. So I didn't actually do it, but I don't have any problem with it. Like I think a lot of coaches agree that it's a fine way to engage your players and get them really into the game. And I don't know why, like, I guess the Suns, like, if they don't want coaches or players coaching against them, maybe they should learn how to play basketball and stop sucking.
And that's what Tyson Chandler said. He's like, if you don't want it to happen, then don't let him beat you or don't let him run up by 40 points.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So I have no issue. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
no, I don't either. You've been talking late night hammer. This is a game for a late night hammer. 225 total. Golden State by 5.5 on the road. I expect Portland to show up and keep this game close. Do have to keep an eye, obviously, on Golden State just in case they do rest someone. Draymond Green is questionable for tonight's game. It doesn't open minutes for Kevin Looney and for you to play him. We said that last time.
Yeah. I was going to like I have YouTube open and I have a little bit of MC Hammer, but then I realized I was like, wait, I have headphones and no one could hear it if I was playing it because it is Hammer time. I if you fade this game, I think you're going to regret like not like at the end of the night, like before this game tips off, you're probably going to be like chilling in like the top 10 of a tournament. And then like this game is going to happen and you're going to like just watch your little dudes going do as like you tilt every Steph Curry 3 and every Damian Lillard 3. There's a lot to like about this game. I think that everyone is going to suit up for the Warriors here. But you do have to kind of keep an eye on it. Like I'd love Draymond Green if he suits up, which he should, in a good spot for him. I think he's cash game viable. I think he has tournament upside in this matchup. But I think Stephen Curry is going to be my dude tonight against a Portland team that's really, really struggled against the pick and roll this season. And their defense has not been great recently. And their 3-point defense especially is starting to really slip. They're allowing 36.7% now on the season. I do really, really like some Curry in this spot.
He's cheap for the potential Curry ceiling tonight. He's only 9,600 on FanDuel. He's 9,300. And you can use him at shooting guard as well on DraftKings, which I think that might be a spot that I look to use and use Lillard at the point guard. And there's various point guard options that can pair with him. So, yeah, I think Curry's definitely in play here. I know he didn't play in the first meeting. We saw Kevin Durant play pretty well in that one as well. I think I'm just going to go with the cheaper of the two. Like I don't really have a significant preference. I think I'm just going to lean towards the guy who's basically $1,000 cheaper on FanDuel at least.
Yeah, Chef Curry is cooking my Valentine's dinner tonight. But like I think in cash games, I think you're still looking at Durant just because he has the better all around game. Like he's going to be able to get you some blocks and steals and things like that. And he's still really cheap too. So like I don't think you have to be afraid of him. The Trailblazers do really struggle against post-up players as well, and Durant about 10% of his possessions averaging like 2 points per game on post-ups. So you could definitely go there and exploit that matchup for him too. But it's definitely Curry for me. Durant and Cash, even in tournaments if you want to go there as well. But Clay's definitely interesting too. It's a solid matchup. I mentioned Portland slipping against 3-point shooters and against shooting guards over the last 10 days, 20th in defensive efficiency. So at 6,300 on DraftKings, that's really, really cheap. He's 65 on FanDuel. I don't mind some tournament exposure there either.
Yeah, I like that. I'm not really digging into the bench guys tonight. I know West has been playing pretty well. I just think I'm going other directions. He's still cheap, though.
On DraftKings, he's still cheap. On FanDuel, he's up to like 4,700, so that's a hard pass. But on DraftKings, like he's still a guy that I think you could look at. I mentioned again, Portland struggling against post-up players. And David West, 21% of his possessions are coming out of post-ups. So you can look there, just know that like his upside is capped because one, it's not a great matchup. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And also he's not going to play more than 16, 17 minutes.
Yeah. And then you also say, I mean, if Green plays, like he's an excellent option.
Yeah, like he's still an excellent option, and especially if we get the news that I think is probably going to happen with Nurkic being out, I think that helps Draymond Green.
Let's go to the Portland side here. You mentioned, Nurkic, he's questionable for tonight's game. And I think you tweeted out it was his whole right side last night.
Yeah, he's got lower back soreness, a right calf strain, and a right oblique strain. So like
he's half a body.
His entire like right side, assuming the lower back pain is on the right side, or maybe it's on the left side and radiates over to the right side, but like his entire right side of his body is in pain. So I would kind of be shocked if he plays in this game.
And we can start there. Do you think it necessarily means a huge jump for Ed Davis? Like, he played 28 minutes last game, was a blowout. Like, I mean, do we completely trust that Davis is going to get like 25 minutes here if Nurkic sits?
No, I don't. Like, I think you can go there if you really, really wanted to. But I don't know that Nurkic being out is going to guarantee him minutes. Like, it's the last time these teams played, Nurkic sat, and it was Zach Collins who saw 25 minutes, and he put up a big game, 25 fantasy points, 9.7 rebounds. He could be the guy that gets some run because I think he's a little bit more athletic than Ed Davis, so he could be the guy that sees the extra run here.
Yeah, I don't mind taking a shot at his cheap price. I think Myers Leonard might get a little extra run, but not a viable. He's just probably another body in the way. But outside of that, I mean, we'll go back to the backcourt here. Lillard, a tremendous option on tonight's slate. I think he's a guy that I'm kind of locking and loading here.
Yeah, without I think he's definitely a great option, regardless of the status of Nurkic. But if Nurkic sits, I don't think people realize you're taking a decent amount of usage off the floor with Nurkic. Damian Lillard without Nurkic on the floor, 37.5% usage rate, 1.32 fantasy points per minute. That's some impressive numbers, and it's a matchup like Dame's going to be up for this game against Curry. So I would like to be able to get like Kemba and Curry and Damian Lillard all in my lineups along with some of these other guys, but it's going to be tough. But like, I think Lillard, if you're wanting to fade like Curry and Durant and you're wanting to get a little bit cheaper exposure to this game, I think Lillard is obviously the top option there.
You have an interest in McCollum here. Like, he's below 7K on both sides. We've seen Golden State, I mean, 7th most fantasy points allowed to shooting guards over the last 10 games. They're 11th in defensive efficiency, but I know that number just took a jump from where it was maybe a few games ago. Like, he's cheap exposure too. Like, McCollum, my issue with him has always been he's kind of too expensive, but at these prices, I don't mind a guy for you going to play mid-30s, high 30s here and still going to take a ton of shots.
Yeah, he's another guy that benefits from Nurkic being off the floor, 33.5% usage rate, 1.08 fantasy points per minute. You mentioned it. He's just too cheap. Again, expect this game to be pretty high scoring. I don't think Golden State's going to blow the Trailblazers out here. And if it stays close, it's going to be because McCollum and Lillard put up big games. So, and we know McCollum has the potential. Like, we just saw him a few games ago come out and put up freaking 50 points against the Bulls. So, like, we know the potential's there. And at that price tag, like, I'm willing to take a shot, especially, like, I think he's cash game viable regardless, but I think he's an excellent tournament option if Nurkic sits.
Yeah. What's wild is Lillard and McCollum both putting up those points in 3 quarters.
Yeah.
It's like we could have saw some big-time history, but Moe Harkless has been drawing starts of late, 30, 25, 31 minutes over his last couple games. He's still really cheap. I don't mind him here. I think he can get around 20, 25 fantasy points in this game.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to roll him out, I think you could. But like, even at his price, I think there's better options on the slate. Like, he's so bad. Like, Moe Harkless is not good at basketball.
Like, he's not. It's just like he's a stars and scrubs guy.
Yeah, like
emphasis on scrub.
Yeah, I feel like if at the end of the night, like, I'm watching my lineups and like he's gonna have like 4 fantasy points, and I'm gonna be like, why you gotta be so Harkless?
The Valentine's Day stuff is just. Thank God this is the last game. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it, Brent. I can't do it anymore.
My bad.
Let's. Who are you giving the most love tonight? Who's out of all the players? Who's your number one guy you're giving the most love tonight? That's the game we're playing here.
Kemba Walker.
I like it. It's Lillard for me. Yeah, I want a big game from Lillard. Give him all my love.
It's about Dame time. People give him some love.
That's it for us. I'm going to go pump an IV in me to continue the rest of the day. Enjoy the All-Star break. Take some time off. Spend time with your family because that's what DK wants you to do.
Family time. Go enjoy your Valentine's Day. Don't catch anything that you don't want the rest of your life. And
I think we're gonna end on that one right
there. Good luck in all your endeavors tonight, whatever those may be.
Yes, good luck in that. Good luck on the slate, and we'll see you guys in basically a week and a half.